Welcome to Dusky Lore. Close your eyes, dim the lights, and listen closely as the shadows begin to speak. Story 1. When I was around 14 or 15 years old, skateboarding was everything to me. It was my refuge, my passion, and the purest way for me to feel free. On weekends, I used to go out skating with my friends until the sun sank below the horizon. Those were some of the happiest moments of my youth. Gliding through the city streets with the wind hitting my face, the sound of the wheels scraping against the asphalt, and my friends' laughter echoing all around me. One weekend night in particular remains vividly etched in my memory. At first, everything seemed the same as always. My friends and I were skating downtown, showing off our new tricks and challenging each other to improve. However, as the night went on, the group slowly started to shrink. One by one, everyone said goodbye and headed home. Eventually, I decided it was time for me to leave too. It was getting late, probably around 10 or 11 at night. After saying goodbye, I took the bus that would drop me off near my house. My friends lived in another direction, far from that road, so I traveled alone, watching the flicker of the city lights through the window as the bus sped along. Although the bustle of the city was still there, the night had that power to wrap everything in an unsettling stillness, like the calm before a storm. When I got off at my stop, I found myself on a main avenue that stretched from east to west. The bus stop was about a 2-minute walk from my house, which was located on a quieter street running north to south. As soon as I took a few steps, I felt the noise of the city fade behind me. The only sound was my rhythmic footsteps striking the pavement. The night air was cool, and a light breeze stirred the leaves of the trees lining the sidewalk. As I approached the intersection connecting the main street to mine, something caught my attention. A figure suddenly appeared, coming out of a curved street in front of the elementary school near my house. It was a man on a bicycle, and he seemed to emerge directly from the shadows, as if the night itself had created him. I knew that street led to a path alongside a creek, a place I knew well, but seeing someone come out of there at that hour immediately put me on alert. My instincts kicked in instantly. Something was wrong. It was not unusual to run into people at night, but there was something about that man's presence that made my stomach tighten. He did not belong there, not at that hour, not on that street. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off that growing sense of unease, but fear clung to me like a shadow. Then I heard him shout, "Hey!" His voice echoed through the stillness of the street, and a chill ran through me. This was not just some random passerby. Something was wrong, and I knew it immediately. My heart started pounding. Adrenaline rushed through my veins. I was almost home, but I did not want him following me there. My home was my refuge, the one place where I felt safe, and I was not about to lead that man straight to it. I kept walking, trying to stay calm, even though my mind was racing, searching for a way out. The man was getting closer, and within seconds he caught up to me. He stopped his bicycle right in front of the school, positioning himself in a way that blocked my path. I felt the air catch in my throat as I looked at him. He was much bigger and heavier than I was, easily twice my size. I was a skinny kid, small for my age, while he looked to be in his 30s or even over 40. That age difference only made the situation even more intimidating. I remember thinking, with my heart pounding, what is a grown man doing following a teenager down a dark street at this hour? The stranger asked me where I was going. His voice sounded slurred, which made me suspect he might have been drunk. There was something about him that did not add up, something that pushed my nerves to the edge. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I tried to hide my fear by answering with a sarcastic remark, using fake confidence as a shield. I told him it did not matter where I was going, hoping my attitude would make him back off. But it did not work. The man leaned toward me and, in a disturbing tone, asked if I wanted to go behind the school and hang out with him. My heart stopped for a second. Those words froze my blood. The very idea of being alone with that stranger, in the dark, behind an empty school, filled me with terror. My mind started desperately searching for an escape. I thought about using my skateboard as a weapon. Maybe I could defend myself if I attacked him first. But what if I missed? What if I only made him angrier? Every possibility seemed worse than the one before. In the middle of the panic, I tried to call 911, but to my horror, the line was busy. A chill ran through my body as I gripped my skateboard so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The fear kept growing, my mind filled with horrible images. Could I run faster than him? Would anyone hear me if I screamed? I thought about banging on doors, asking for help, making noise. But all the houses were dark and silent. It was as if the world had stopped, leaving me completely alone, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Then, as I frantically searched for some sign of hope, I saw her, an older woman walking on the other side of the street about 65 feet behind us. In that moment, it was like seeing a light in the middle of the darkness. Without thinking, I ran toward her, screaming for help. The man on the bicycle followed me, but I did not care. The only thing I wanted was to reach that woman. When I finally got to her, I begged her through sobs to help me. My voice was shaking so badly that I could barely speak. However, to my surprise, the woman reacted with fear. She became defensive, suspicious of two strangers suddenly appearing in the middle of the night. She told me to leave her alone, but I could not give up. I needed her to listen to me. I noticed that she had an accent, and guided by instinct, I asked her if she spoke Polish, a language I knew because of my family. When she answered yes, I felt like a rope had pulled me back to reality. I quickly explained the situation to her in Polish, my words tumbling out in panic. As soon as she understood what was happening, her attitude changed completely. Her face softened, and for the first time all night I felt a spark of hope. The woman told me to try calling 911 again. I told her that the line had been busy before, but she insisted firmly. As I pulled out my phone to try again, I saw the man on the bicycle start to back away. He muttered something about not wanting any trouble, turned around and rode off toward the school, disappearing into the darkness. My heart was still pounding hard in my chest, but at least the immediate danger had passed. I finally managed to get through to 911 and reported the incident. They assured me they would send a patrol car to check the area. However, when they called me back later, they told me they had not found anyone matching the description. The man had disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. That night was, without a doubt, the most terrifying experience of my life. I still shudder when I think about what could have happened if that woman had not been there. I will be eternally grateful for her help, and because, thanks to her, nothing worse happened. Since then, the way I see personal safety has changed completely. Before that night, I had never truly thought about how vulnerable I could be, even in places that felt familiar to me. But that experience opened my eyes to the dangers that exist, even in the places we know best. Story 2. Delivering pizzas is usually a simple job, almost routine. And among all my customers, Mr. Pillane was the most consistent. Every Thursday night without fail, he placed the same order, a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese. He lived in an old rundown house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees so thick they gave the place an isolated and sinister feel. I almost never saw him. He was a solitary, reserved man. Instead of opening the door, he used a pulley system with a rope and a sliding tray that connected his porch to the entrance of the driveway. I would place the pizza on the tray, and from inside he would pull it up. It was a strange habit, yes, but over time I got used to it. That was simply how things worked with Mr. Pillane. One Thursday evening, however, everything was different. I received a call from him, something unusual, since he normally placed his orders online. This time he ordered 2 pizzas and mentioned something peculiar. He asked me to keep using the usual rope system. There was something in his voice that made me nervous. I could not say exactly why, but he sounded different, as if something was wrong. I tried not to overthink it. I assumed maybe he had company and simply wanted more food. I got in the car and drove down the dark, winding road that led to his house, a road I already knew well. In the distance, the house appeared as always, the porch light flickering faintly through the trees. But this time, something caught my attention immediately. The rope with the tray was not lowered. He always left it ready, hanging there waiting for the pizza. But now there was no sign of it. I stood beside my car, the 2 boxes in my hands, staring toward the house. Everything was wrapped in an unsettling silence. I slowly walked toward the porch, expecting the tray to drop down at any moment. But it did not happen. The house seemed to be watching me in the darkness, still and grim. Then I saw it. A shadow moved near the basement window. I felt my breath catch. A hunched, masked figure crouched beside the window and disappeared the moment it realized I had seen it. A chill ran through my entire body. Something terrible was happening. I cautiously moved to the side of the house and looked through the basement window, right where I had seen the intruder. The glass was slightly open, and inside I could barely make out more masked silhouettes moving through the dimness. My heart started pounding, fear taking hold of me. What were they doing in there? With a trembling hand, I pulled out my phone and dialed emergency services. I could barely speak as I explained the situation. There were people inside Mr. Pellin's house, probably intruders, and one of them was in the basement. The operator assured me the police were already on the way, but the waiting felt endless. I backed away slowly, still holding the pizzas. I did not want to leave Mr. Pellin alone, but I also could not burst in there myself. I stood frozen, staring at the basement when I saw them again. The masked men were dragging something heavy. It was him. Mr. Pellin was tied up with ropes, struggling weakly while they beat him. The sound of their fists hitting his body turned my stomach. Every blow sent a shiver down my spine. I had never felt so helpless. All I could do was wait for the police and pray they arrived in time. A few minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the street. The officers acted immediately, surrounding the house before forcing their way inside. I stayed back, my heart racing, listening to the shouting, the footsteps, the chaos inside the house. The masked men tried to flee, but the police were faster. One by one, they were captured and dragged outside, their faces hidden behind expressionless masks. There were 3 of them. 3 figures dressed completely in black, with no identity and no clear sign of their intentions. As they were being led away in handcuffs, I saw them bring out Mr. Pellin. A wave of relief washed over me, though it was mixed with horror. He was alive, but barely. His face was swollen and covered in bruises. His body looked battered and fragile. The ropes had left deep marks on his wrists and ankles. He could barely stay on his feet. There was pain in his eyes, but also a spark of strength, as if he refused to break. The paramedics placed him on a stretcher and loaded him into the ambulance. The police, meanwhile, took the attackers away, though no one understood the reason for the assault. There were no signs of robbery, no demands for money, no trace of revenge. It was as if those men had broken in only to hurt him, out of pure cruelty, for no apparent reason. Later that night, I went to the hospital to see him. Mr. Pellin was connected to several machines, his body wrapped in bandages, his thin figure seeming to shrink even more beneath the sheets. I stood beside his bed, not knowing what to say, until he looked at me and with a weak smile murmured, "If you hadn't called, I don't know what would have happened." A chill ran through me as I remembered what I had seen. The masks, the blows, the dull sound of fists. The way they dragged him through his own house as if he were a broken doll. Why had they done something like that? What had he done to deserve such brutality? The police never managed to discover the motive. The masked men refused to speak, even after being arrested. It was as if they had only wanted to torment an old man for pleasure, without motive, without explanation. To this day, I still think about that night. Every Thursday when I pass by Mr. Pellin's house, the memories come back. The expressionless masks, the fear in his eyes, the sound of the blows, and the helplessness I felt at not being able to do more. That scene was burned into my mind forever, and I cannot help feeling that someone somewhere is still watching, waiting for their next victim. Before moving on to the next story, if this is your first time here, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you can receive our upcoming horror stories. Your support matters. Share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you. Story 3. It was a cold afternoon just a few days before Christmas. I had just finished my last class of the semester and was finally heading home. Christmas break was waiting for me, and I could not wait to relax. My family had traveled to Scotland for the weekend, so I was going to have the house all to myself. A quiet weekend alone, or at least that was what I thought. When I parked in front of the house, the freezing winter air hit my face. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked toward the front door. The place was completely dark, without a single sign of life. It was a little unsettling knowing I would be alone for the next few days, but I did not mind. I was used to the calm, and after the chaos of university, I welcomed the silence. As soon as I stepped inside, I turned on the lights and locked the door. The warmth of the house wrapped around me immediately, and a sense of relief ran through my body. I left my backpack by the entrance and went upstairs to my room. I took off my jacket, feeling the exhaustion of the day slowly begin to fade. All I wanted was to relax. A long hot bath was the first thing on my list. After the shower, I went downstairs to the kitchen in my socks, noticing the contrast between the soft carpet and the cold tile floor. The house remained silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I made something quick for dinner. I heated up some leftovers from the day before and sat down to eat. Every bite felt like a small moment of relief after weeks of academic stress. When I finished, I went to the living room, where my PlayStation was waiting for me. I turned on the console, grabbed the controller, and put on my headset. The familiar startup sound filled the room, and I settled into the couch, ready to disconnect from the world. For the first hour, the game completely absorbed me. Everything seemed calm, until a loud noise suddenly pulled me out of the game. A heavy thud echoed from upstairs. I froze, my fingers still on the controller. I thought maybe something had fallen. A badly placed book, some object that had been left unbalanced. I shrugged it off and kept playing, trying to ignore it. But then it happened again. Another thud, louder this time, coming directly from my bedroom. The sound echoed through the ceiling, making the silence that followed feel even thicker, almost suffocating. My heart started pounding. It was impossible for something to be moving up there. I was the only one in the house. For a few seconds, I thought about going upstairs to check, but fear paralyzed me. What if it was not a fallen object? What if someone was in the house? I could feel my legs trembling as I crossed the room. I locked the living room door, turning the key with shaking hands. The noise had been so sudden, so out of place, that my mind started imagining the worst. A burglar, a stranger, someone lurking in the darkness. I ran to the window and looked outside, the glass fogged up with my breath. The night was still. Snow was falling slowly, covering the street with a white blanket. There were no car lights, no people, no movement at all. Everything seemed frozen, but upstairs, something had moved. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called the police. With a shaky voice, I explained that I thought someone had broken into the house. The person on the other end of the line assured me they would send someone right away. Even so, the minutes stretched out like hours. The sound of my own breathing mixed with the creaking of the wood. Every little squeak made me jump. I could not take my eyes off the door, afraid that at any moment it would open and someone would come down the stairs. Finally, I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. Blue and red lights reflected on the walls. A wave of relief washed over me. The police had arrived. I let the officers in, still trembling. One of them immediately went upstairs, while the other stayed with me, asking questions I could barely answer. My head was still spinning, full of fear and uncertainty. I was not even sure anymore that I had not imagined everything. About 20 minutes passed before the officer who had gone upstairs came back down. His face was calm, but his words froze my blood. "There has been a break-in," he said. "The window in your bedroom is open. It looks like someone came in through there." I felt my stomach drop. I clearly remembered locking every door and window before leaving that morning. Someone had forced their way in, had been inside my house, in my most personal space. The officer continued. "It does not look like anything was taken. Maybe they ran off when they heard you come home." I swallowed hard as reality hit me. The thuds I had heard were not things falling. It was someone moving around up there, maybe watching me, waiting. And I had been sitting in the living room, playing games, completely unaware. The officers searched the entire house, but they found no trace of the intruder. They recommended that I spend the night somewhere else just to be safe, but I refused. It was my home and I did not want to abandon it. However, when the officers left and I closed the door behind them, that sense of safety I had always felt vanished completely. It was no longer my refuge, but a place that had been violated, invaded. That night I understood something I will never forget. Sometimes fear does not come from what you hear, but from what you know might still be there, silent, waiting. Story 4. When I was in college, I lived in a small 2-story house right next to campus. It was nothing special, but it was cheap, and for my roommate, Jason and me, it was home. We were both practically broke, surviving on part-time jobs and whatever was left of our student loans. Jason was a quiet, reserved guy, although he had some questionable friendships. I did not know much about his life outside of college, but there was something about one of his friends that gave me a bad feeling. His name was Kyle. I had seen him a couple of times, and from the very beginning, I knew he was not someone you would want to trust. He always looked nervous, his eyes darting from side to side as if he expected something or someone to catch up with him. He had an unsettling, almost aggressive energy, like he could explode at any moment. Even so, Jason seemed to trust him, so I decided not to say anything, although maybe I should have. It was late, close to midnight, when I heard heavy footsteps on the upper floor. I was in my room trying to study, but the noise made me stop. I could hear Jason's voice muffled through the walls, speaking in a low and hurried tone. It was not unusual for him to have visitors, but there was something in his voice that made me uneasy. Then I heard another voice, Kyle's. I had not seen him in weeks, but just hearing his tone filled me with dread. He sounded upset, desperate, though I could not clearly make out what he was saying. The floor creaked as they moved around upstairs, and suddenly, without warning, the basement door flew open. That basement was a horrible place, damp, cold, and covered in mold. The concrete floor was cracked and the wooden beams groaned with every step. The air down there always smelled of moisture and rot. It was the kind of place that made your skin crawl just by looking at it. The idea of someone going down there sent a shiver through me. I carefully stepped out of my room, trying not to make any noise, and moved toward the staircase. From above, I could hear Jason and Kyle's voices more clearly. They had lowered their voices, but now their words were easier to make out, and what they were saying made me hold my breath. "Just for a few days," Jason said, his voice trembling. "I can't stay outside, Jason," Kyle replied. "They're everywhere. The cops are looking for me. I need to hide here." My heart skipped a beat. The police? What had this guy done? I did not have to wait long to find out. "I didn't mean to shoot them," Kyle whispered, furious and shaking. "It was supposed to be a quick robbery, in and out, but they fought back. I panicked. I didn't want to kill them." Those words hit me like a hammer. Kyle had murdered 2 people during a robbery, and now he was hiding in our house. My hands trembled as I gripped the banister. I had to get out of there, call the police, do something. But fear paralyzed me. I could not move. I heard the basement door creak open again, followed by footsteps descending into the darkness. Kyle was going down there to hide, into that damp hole beneath our feet. I turned around and went back to my room, closing the door carefully. My heart was pounding so hard I felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. What the hell had Jason done? How could he have brought a murderer into our house? I sat on my bed, staring at the floor, my mind completely blank. If Kyle found out that I knew the truth, what would he do to me? And Jason? Was he an accomplice, or just a desperate fool trying to help his friend? I felt trapped inside my own home. The next few days were unbearable. Jason barely spoke, avoided looking at me, and pretended everything was normal. But I knew Kyle was still down there. I could feel his presence, lurking beneath the floor like an invisible shadow waiting for its moment. At night, I barely slept. Every creak in the floor, every whistle of the wind outside made me jump. The tension was so thick it felt like the walls were closing in around me. And then it happened. One night I heard footsteps on the basement stairs. Slow, deliberate. Each creaking step made my breathing stop. I stayed completely still, my eyes wide open, listening as the footsteps climbed and climbed, until they stopped at the top. I waited, trembling for the creak of the door, but it never came. The footsteps retreated back into the darkness of the basement. That was the final straw. Fear was consuming me. I had to do something. The next morning, while Jason was still asleep, I left the house with my phone in my hand. I called the police, speaking quietly, telling them everything I knew. They did not take long to arrive. Several patrol cars surrounded the house, and the officers went in with their weapons ready. Jason froze, unable to understand what was happening, while the police searched every room. I watched from the sidewalk, my heart pounding as they went down into the basement. I heard shouting, the sounds of a struggle, and then finally they brought him out. Kyle did not surrender easily. They dragged him out in handcuffs, his face pale and his eyes wide with fury and fear. Before they put him into the patrol car, he looked at me, a cold, empty look full of hatred. A look that made me understand that for him this was not over. Jason moved out a week later. We barely spoke again. The house never felt the same afterward. Even though Kyle was gone, his shadow remained there, especially in the basement. He had left something behind, a dark, icy presence that could not be erased. To this day, I still remember that week, the moment I realized how close I had been to real danger. And sometimes when the night is silent and the house seems asleep, I can still hear it. Those slow, heavy footsteps coming up from the basement. Story 5. It was late when I left a friend's house. The sky was completely dark, without a single visible star, and the road stretched out in front of me, long, empty, and silent. I had been driving for quite a while. The constant hum of the engine and the stillness of the night gave me a strange sense of calm, almost hypnotic. The road was straight, lined with thick forests on both sides. The tall trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the car's headlights could barely tear through the endless blackness beyond the asphalt. I did not mind that nighttime drive. There was something peaceful in its solitude, a kind of quiet that only deserted roads can offer. But when I looked at the dashboard, my calm shattered in an instant. The fuel gauge was much lower than I thought. I felt my stomach drop as I tried to remember the last gas station I had passed. It was far behind me. Too far now. The engine began to sputter and lose power, and before I could react, the car came to a complete stop, motionless on the side of the highway. Around me there was only darkness, dense forest on both sides, and not a soul in sight. A chill ran down my spine. The silence that had once felt peaceful now seemed heavy, suffocating, almost threatening. I locked the doors immediately and pulled out my phone, hoping I had at least some signal. Luckily, I managed to contact a tow truck. While I waited for a response, I looked around nervously, watching the shadows of the trees seem to shift slightly under the faint moonlight. Time passed slowly. The silence became unbearable, and although I tried to distract myself by listening to the whisper of the wind, it only made the atmosphere feel even more unsettling. I checked the mirrors again and again, searching for any sign of lights, movement, or help, but there was nothing. Only endless darkness, until something moved. A flicker in the corner of my vision made me quickly turn my head toward the passenger side window. Two figures were emerging from the forest, walking toward my car. My heart skipped a beat. The men came closer, and I could see their faces in the pale moonlight. They were dirty, with torn clothes, and they looked so disheveled that they seemed as if they had been wandering through the woods for days. They stopped beside my vehicle, staring at me through the glass. One of them raised his hand and knocked softly on the window. "Help us," he said, his voice muffled by the glass. I froze. I did not know what to do. My instinct screamed at me not to open the door, to keep it locked. There was something in their eyes, a mixture of desperation and something harder to describe, something that made my skin crawl. The second man pulled on the door handle, trying to open it. My pulse shot up. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called the police, whispering as I explained what was happening, afraid they might hear me. The operator assured me that they would send a patrol car immediately, but the fear would not let go of me. What if they got inside before the officers arrived? The men kept knocking on the glass, leaving greasy marks on the windows. I avoided looking at them directly. The intensity in their eyes made me feel exposed, vulnerable. Time stretched on like an eternity, until finally in the distance, flashes of blue and red lit up the road. A wave of relief washed over me when I saw the patrol car stop behind my vehicle. The officers stepped out with flashlights, and when the two men saw them, they backed away, retreating a few steps into the shadows of the forest. One of the officers approached my window. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, although my heart was still pounding. "We're going to check," he said, and together with his partner, he walked into the trees, shining their flashlights into the darkness. I stayed in the car, my fingers still gripping the steering wheel, even though the engine was off. I heard the officers call out to the men, and after a few seconds they came back out of the woods. They no longer looked threatening. Their faces showed exhaustion, defeat, fear. I listened as they spoke with the police, and little by little the tension in the air changed. Curiosity overcame fear, so I lowered the window just a few inches to hear what they were saying. Their voices trembled as they told their story. They were not trying to attack me. They were running away. One of the officers came back to my car. "These men are not criminals," he explained gravely. "Their families were attacked by a gang of robbers. They have been hiding in the woods trying to escape. The robbers are still out there." A chill ran through my body. The danger was not coming from the men in front of me, but from the criminals who were chasing them. The officers called for backup, and within a few minutes, several more patrol cars arrived at the scene. They took the two men to safety while a group of officers, flashlights in hand, went into the forest in search of the attackers. I remained in the car, with a cold sweat covering my skin. The idea that those dangerous men were hiding among the trees kept me on edge. It did not take long before they found them. The robbers were arrested, their hard, expressionless faces lit up by the flashing patrol lights. One of the officers approached and helped me out of the car, assuring me that everything was under control. I was still shaking. The night that had begun as a peaceful drive had turned into a nightmare. I looked toward the forest. The shadows were still there, deep and silent, as if they were hiding secrets they would rather not reveal. The police thanked me for staying calm, but the truth was that I did not feel calm at all. I only wanted to go home, to leave that empty, dark road behind me. When I finally started the car again, with the tank already taken care of by the officers, I looked one last time at the line of trees. Their silhouettes remained motionless under the moon. And as I drove away, I could not help thinking that, if I ever got stranded in the darkness again, I hoped I would not find anyone stepping out from the shadows. Story 6. The night was cold and silent. The only sound came from the soft whisper of the trees and the distant howl of the wind. I was camping in a remote area of Alaska, deep in the woods, far from any sign of civilization. It was just my friend Mike and me, lost in the middle of nowhere. Our tents were set up beside an old unpaved road, covered in gravel and full of potholes. That road stretched for miles into the frozen wilderness, the kind of place people only go when they are looking for absolute solitude. No one was supposed to be out there, especially not in the middle of the night. We had decided to go to sleep early, exhausted after a long day of hiking. The air was freezing, but inside my sleeping bag I was warm and comfortable. I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the peaceful silence of the forest. I do not know how much time passed before I woke up, but the first thing I noticed was a strange sound, wheels on gravel. It was a faint noise at first, but it gradually grew louder, getting closer. I opened my eyes and stared at the roof of the tent, confused, trying to understand what I was hearing. A car. There was a car on that road. At that hour, in the middle of nowhere. I sat up inside my sleeping bag, my heart beginning to race. The sound grew louder until suddenly, a pair of bright lights shone through the fabric of the tent. The vehicle drove past, its headlights sweeping across the campsite for a moment before disappearing into the darkness. I lay back down, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe someone lost, a traveler, a park ranger. But deep down, I knew it was not normal. No one drives down that road at midnight. I thought that would be the end of it. But it was not. A few minutes later, the sound came back. The engine roaring, the wheels crushing the gravel. The car had returned. I sat up suddenly, my pulse pounding. The lights appeared again, even brighter this time. The vehicle moved slowly until it stopped about 40 feet from our tents. The headlights were pointed directly at us, flooding the campsite with a harsh white light. I froze, not knowing what to do. The car did not move. Only the low purr of the engine broke the silence. The light blinded me. I felt that whoever was inside could see us perfectly, but we could see nothing. Mike was still asleep, unaware of everything. I thought about waking him up, but I could not make myself move. My mind filled with questions. Who would be driving out here? Why had they stopped? And why were they shining the light straight at us? The minutes passed, long and heavy. The car was still there, motionless, with its headlights on. Every muscle in my body was tense, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And then, finally, the driver's door opened with a creak. A dark silhouette stepped out of the vehicle. It was only a black figure against the blinding light. It stood still for a few seconds, watching, before beginning to walk toward our tents. I held my breath, gripping the sleeping bag with my hands. The man moved slowly with measured steps, the crunch of gravel marking his approach. Every step made my heart pound harder. He circled the campsite without saying a word. He moved around slowly, inspecting everything around him, as if he were evaluating us. The only sounds were his breathing and the distant hum of the engine. I could see him through the bottom of the tent, his feet, his shadow moving just inches away from me. He passed right beside it, so close that I could feel the air shift. He moved slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey. I did not dare make a sound. I only prayed that he would leave, that he would not try to unzip the tent, or something worse. The seconds felt endless. Then suddenly he stopped, right in front of my tent. I could hear him breathing slow and heavy, too close. A cold sweat ran down my back. I thought about running, but where would I go? We were in the middle of the forest, miles from anyone. Fear kept me frozen, thoughts crashing through my head, each one more terrifying than the last. I do not know how much time passed, seconds, minutes, maybe more, until I heard him walk away. His footsteps moved back, fading little by little. Then came the creak of the car door. The engine roared again, the headlights turned, and finally the vehicle drove off slowly until it disappeared into the darkness. I stayed still, not daring to move or even breathe. I listened to every little sound, waiting, afraid that he would come back. But the forest returned to its usual silence, as if nothing had happened. I let out the breath I had been holding, my whole body trembling. Mike murmured something in his sleep, turning over in his sleeping bag without waking up. I could not go back to sleep for the rest of the night. Every creak of the wind, every whisper of the leaves made me jump. My mind kept replaying the scene, the car, the headlights, the figure in the dark, his footsteps around our tent. Who was that man? And what was he looking for in the middle of nowhere? When the sun finally came up, I felt an indescribable sense of relief. The daylight eased the fear a little, but the feeling was still there, anchored in my chest. We packed up camp quickly without saying much. As we drove away, I could not help looking back one more time at the place where we had slept. The forest, so calm under the sunlight, looked like a different world. but I knew the truth. That night, the forest had been darker, colder, more alive than I had ever imagined. And even though the man left, a part of him seemed to remain there, among the trees, waiting. Story 7. My name is Linda, and I have been living alone for more than 2 years. My husband is in the United States Army stationed overseas. It has not been easy, but over time I got used to the silence and the routine of a life without him. My only company is Max, my dog, a large and protective German Shepherd. With him in the house, I always felt safe, but one night everything changed. It was Friday night. I had just finished cleaning the kitchen after dinner. Silence filled the house, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, making the branches tap softly against the windows, like long bony fingers touching the glass. I did not think much of it. Living alone teaches you to ignore the little noises that fill the night. Max was sleeping at my feet while I wiped down the countertops. Suddenly, he lifted his head. His ears went up, and a low growl came from his throat. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, not expecting an answer. Then I heard it, a sound coming from outside, like footsteps on the gravel of the driveway. It was faint, but enough to freeze my blood. Max jumped to his feet, barking loudly, his body rigid in front of the front door. I went to the window and carefully pulled the curtain back a little to look outside. The porch light dimly lit the driveway, but I did not see anyone. Even so, Max would not stop barking, pacing back and forth, restless. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. The wind, some animal, anything. "Come on, Max," I said, trying to calm both of us down. "It is time to sleep." I turned off the downstairs lights and went up to my bedroom. Max followed me, still alert, though calmer. Upstairs, I felt a little safer. The house seemed smaller, more enclosed, almost cozy, with the doors closed and the windows tightly locked. I put on my pajamas, got under the covers, and closed my eyes, trying to shake off the bad feeling. Hours passed, and eventually I managed to fall asleep, but in the middle of the night, a loud crash woke me up instantly. My heart hammered in my chest as I sat up in bed, holding my breath. Max was growling again, but this time in a different way, deeper, fiercer. Then I understood. The front door had been forced open. I could hear the wind coming through the open entrance, and mixed in with the whistle of the air, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the living room right below me. Fear paralyzed me for a moment. With trembling hands, I grabbed the phone from my nightstand and dialed 911. "Please help me," I barely whispered, my voice breaking. "There is someone in my house." I ran to lock the bedroom door and press myself against it, as if that alone would be enough to keep me safe. Max stood in front of me, tall and rigid, growling with a force I had never seen in him before. I could hear the footsteps moving slowly across the first floor, from room to room, as if the intruder knew exactly where to go. Then the footsteps stopped. My breathing became quick and shallow. The silence was absolute, except for the frantic pounding in my ears. I prayed that the police would arrive in time. In the distance, the sound of sirens began to grow louder, getting closer. A wave of relief ran through me, although the fear was still anchored in my chest. The officers arrived quickly. I heard their voices outside, firm commands, and then the sound of footsteps entering the house. I remained locked in the bedroom, trembling, unable to move. A few minutes passed before someone knocked on my door. "Ma'am, it's the police. You are safe now." I opened the door with shaking hands. 2 officers were standing in front of me. Max ran out barking, though he quickly calmed down when he saw that it was over. I went downstairs with them, my legs weak. The front door was destroyed, hanging off its hinges, the lock ripped out. My house, my refuge, had been violated. It no longer felt like the place where I lived, but like a foreign, contaminated space. Outside, I saw the man in handcuffs inside the patrol car. I did not recognize him. He looked unkempt, his eyes wide, and there was a disturbing smile on his face. One of the officers turned to me with a serious expression. "Ma'am," he said, "we have been looking for this man for weeks. He has been following you. He knew your husband is in the military and that you live alone. He was planning to rob you." I felt as if the ground disappeared beneath my feet. My stomach turned. My body was shaking. That man had been watching me, learning my routines, my schedule, waiting for the perfect moment to break in. I looked around at the police, the lights, the chaos in my living room, and realized that nothing would ever feel the same again. The place where I was supposed to feel safest now felt strange, unfamiliar, invaded. And as the patrol car drove away with that man inside, I felt a chill run across my skin. Just thinking that he had been out there, watching me for weeks, made me shudder. Simply imagining him lurking in the darkness, waiting, gave me a feeling I had never experienced before. Pure terror. Story 8. I work in a small office downtown. Nothing special. A few desks, computers, and piles of papers stacked everywhere. Most days are quiet, especially after business hours when everyone leaves. Still, sometimes I have to stay late, and it was on one of those nights that I experienced something I will never forget. The office was empty. My coworkers had left hours earlier, and the only sound was the constant hum of the air conditioner. It was already past 9 at night, and I was still sitting at my computer, trying to finish some reports I had to turn in the next day. The dim light from the screen was the only source of illumination, casting long stretched shadows across the walls. I felt calm, although the silence of the place always gave me a strange feeling. That feeling of knowing you are alone, but sensing that someone else is there, watching. I tried to ignore that uneasiness and focus on my work. I had stayed late before, but that night felt different. The air seemed heavier, thicker, as if something invisible were filling the space. After what felt like forever typing and staring at spreadsheets, I leaned back in my chair to stretch my back. That was when I noticed it. In the reflection of the screen, something moved behind me. A fleeting shadow, a dark blur that crossed the background quickly. I blinked, confused. I thought maybe it was my tired eyes or a trick of the light. I turned my head, expecting to see nothing, but something caught my attention in the farthest corner of the room. There, the shadows seemed denser than usual, as if they had all gathered into one single point. I frowned, straining my eyes. The office was dim, yes, but never completely dark. The lights from the hallway outside usually filtered through the glass door, providing enough light. I rubbed my eyes, telling myself I was tired, and yet, when I looked again, the dark shape was still there. And the most unsettling part was that it did not match any object. I tried to ignore it and went back to my reports, but my mind kept returning to that corner. Every few seconds I looked up, expecting the shadow to disappear. It did not. If anything, it seemed to be moving very slowly. I decided to get up, thinking that walking around a little might help clear my mind. But when I stood up, a strange sensation ran through my body. The silence was absolute. The air felt dense, as if the oxygen itself had become thicker. I had the impression that I was being watched. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. I took a few steps toward the small kitchen at the back of the office, passing by the corner where I had seen the shadow. As I got closer, something inside me told me I should not do it. But at the same time, it was as if some force was pushing me to look. When I reached it, I stopped cold. It was not an illusion. The shadow was there, and it was moving. It had no human shape or solid form. It was a dark mass slowly turning, like smoke trapped underwater. My heart began pounding violently. I wanted to run, but my legs would not respond. My eyes could not look away from it. The shadow seemed to stretch toward me, as if it were trying to reach me. The air suddenly turned freezing cold. So cold that I could see my own breath escaping in small white clouds. The silence was absolute except for the faint sound of the air conditioner, which was barely still working. The dark mass kept moving, drawing closer in a deliberate way. A deep sense of terror came over me, as if something terrible was about to happen. And then, without warning, the shadow flickered and disappeared. The atmosphere changed. The light seemed to grow a little warmer. The air returned to its normal temperature. I stood there, motionless, my heart racing, trying to understand what had just happened. There was no possible logical explanation. I quickly gathered my things, not even fully shutting down the computer. I did not want to stay in that place for one more minute. As I headed toward the door, I gave the corner one last glance. The shadow was gone, but the feeling of being watched was still there, hanging in the air. I nearly ran out, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. When I finally stepped outside the building, I took a deep breath. The cool night air barely managed to calm me. My hands were shaking as I searched for my car keys. During the drive home, my mind kept replaying the scene over and over again. That thing, whatever it was, had revealed itself right in front of me. There was no explanation, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never stay late working alone in that office again. Never again.